I've always been enchanted by Sydney's town hall. It stands at the city's geographic heart, and through its arteries flow the majority of its citizens each day. It is nearly unavoidable to pass through the city without traversing its space in some form. Its role in Sydney's history and everyday life is just as broad. However, to begin to try and understand what Town Hall is to the city it governs, it's worth examining both the history of the building and the social interactions that occur both in and around it. First and foremost, and almost by definition, the Town Hall is a meeting place. From the steps to the chambers, people from society's fringe to the centre come to the building to meet each other. It is also a somewhat more metaphorical meeting place, with many different spheres of social life intersecting at its site. As a result, we can learn a great deal from Bachelard, who wrote, "A house that has been experienced is not an inert box. Inhabited space transcends geometric space." However, for many years it existed only in the imagination of young colonialists, while the current site functioned as the continent's first Anglo-Saxon burial ground. The campaign for a grand building to house local government was the first of many conflicts and disagreements to be associated with the physical dimensions of Town Hall. Advocates were keen to find a site far from the colonial administration on Macquarie Street. However, it took them nearly 27 years from the incorporation of the council in 1842 before the Cathedral Close Act in 1869, which granted the local government half an acre of ground upon which to build their town hall. Records suggest, from inception to completion in 1889, discourses around the form and the function of the town hall largely saw it as an opportunity to establish and assert a sense of identity for the colony through a symbolic building. Much of the disagreement was around what sort of identity the colony wanted to put forward. Emphasising its Europeanness appeared to be the consensus among those skilled with the English language. As such, a design drawing from the Victorian Second Empire style, with additional flourishes that have been described as somewhat more French, was chosen. The winning design was described by the Herald's Richard Appleby as being, to quote, "of a lavishly ornamented composition with focal tower and fanciful roofs." However, some Sydney craftsmen were displeased at the predilection for British furnishings, with everything from the doorknobs by way of the grand organ to the famous clock and bells themselves being manufactured in England and assembled in Australia by English men. However, the records from which these discourses can be cited only feature the voices of white colonialists at the expense of all others. Additionally, the only institutions I've been able to find records regarding the building happen to be founded and regulated by those very same dominant forces. From its very beginning, the intention of the building appears to be that of emphasising and reaffirming the identity colonists had of themselves. A constant thread I keep encountering in documentation around the building is that although rhetoric such as a people's house or a temple to democracy are often quoted in both the press and council documents, this is often far from the case, with large numbers of people excluded from its spaces. Indeed, in its original form, the building was fenced off from the city, with ordinary citizens not permitted in. However, even within the white colonialist society for whom the building was constructed, there was even more division, with 12 different men claiming credit for the building by the time it was finally completed. It would appear this is partly due to the drawn-out process of its construction, which led to multiple revisions and staff changes over the 22 years between its initial drafting and opening. However, the most telling disagreement was between Edward Bell, the city engineer, and at that stage the de facto architect for the city, and J.H. Wilson, who had won a competition to design the building, with this being his original draft. Wilson was kept on at the mayor's request to oversee its construction. This was the first recorded time an artisan was kept on to oversee the work of a craftsman on a major building site in Australia's history, and occurred at the same time similar shifts from crafts and tradesmen towards educated professionals were occurring internationally. Both men saw the building as their own, and as such there was a great deal of contempt between the two of them. The tradesmen working on the building became involved as well, and as story has it, memorialised Bell in one of the building's ornamental lion heads. These lion heads adorn many corners of the building, the majority of which appear in traditional poses. One, however, immediately to the right of the entry stairs, appears to be winking. A 1983 edition of Anchor Point magazine suggests, and to quote, "Bell sighted the true horizontal of the stonework by closing one eye and roaring instructions to his harried workmen. When the building was completed in 1874, one of the lion's heads decorating the stonework was winking its eye. an uncanny resemblance to Bell. Beasley suggests there was another unique head on the southern end of the building. However, it was destroyed in the 1960s. In one version of the story, of which there are many, the council was alleged to be apathetic about maintaining the building's facade, with the naturally white sandstone becoming blackened by both biological and particle soiling, as can be seen in this image from the time. A group of Sydney University architecture students, inspired by the recently popular trend for stonework cleaning in Europe, argued that to not clean the building showed a lack of concern for its heritage. As such, they attempted to clean the lion's head with an acidic cleaning agent and a bit too much elbow grease, which severely damaged it, leaving a white stub protruding from the wall. Shamed into action, the council hired professional cleaners to finish the task across the entire building and to continue maintenance into the future. However, unfortunately, the section of the wall in which the head was alleged to protrude has been removed from public access since the construction of the brutalist Town Hall office building in 1977. The disputes about who can and can't make claims to Town Hall exist beyond its structural qualities as well, extending into its role as a civic space. Since its opening, many groups have requested use of its spaces, namely Centennial Hall and its vestibule, for civil functions. However, for most of its life, there has not been a rationale for hiring. Instead, access has been granted based on the ad hoc judgment of councillors or officials within the city clerk's office. After the First World War, this practice became heavily criticised and the council attempted to establish a formal process. However, in the years after it was established, many events were granted permission at reduced or no fee as special exceptions. Those granted exemptions were most frequently from religious or politically influential backgrounds. During periods of a Labour or a Liberal council, permission for both unions and business groups respectively were granted or denied with little or no explanation. However, it wasn't just formal politics which determined access to the hall's space. Elitism was also an element. When the New South Wales Sports Club asked to hire Centennial Hall for a boxing championship in 1907, the town clerk refused the application, stating it would lend the club an air of respectability undeserved. It is also notable that I was unable to find reference to any Indigenous or recent immigrant group using the hall in any formal capacity during its entire first century. However, as cinemas and alternative entertainment venues such as the Opera House opened their doors throughout the city, the cultural power of Town Hall was severely reduced. No longer would entertainers compete for its bookings, held at the mercy of the town clerk to adjudicate who is of superior quality or character. However, the spaces within and around the building remain heavily regulated. Despite boasting it's open to the public on their website, at no point over the 5 visits I made to the building for this project was I permitted in any further than the entry lobby. The building is scattered with these staff-only signs, with aristocratic rope fencing preventing you from going any further. When I prodded the irritated security guard, who clearly wished I'd just go away, about how to see the rest of the building, he suggested the only way to do so was to contact numerous people within the Town Hall administration to arrange entrance at a later date, most likely at my expense. Over those visits, I also observed a stark division about those engaging in protest, with causes that have been tolerated by the institution often getting access.
To introduce the unions that are here today, and they'll come up on stage and present their flags. First of all, we have the Australian Manufacturing Workers Union.
While those who more aggressively resist hegemony left on its doorstep. Of all the features of Town Hall, its doorstep is perhaps the most steeped in public history. Originally thought of as a prime position for the leadership to review marches, it was consumed by the Commons during the 60s and became more associated with dissent and heavily resisted the regulation of the hall. During the last 50 years, it has become the city's meeting point extraordinaire. However, a conversation with an old staff member at the town hall suggested that as mobile phones have become more popular, the number of people meeting there has also decreased.
But they
The discourses which had constructed Town Hall in my own imagination all suggested the building was representative of a grand and nostalgic early period of Sydney's history. However, looking back through this history, my view becomes problematised, with many people of the city frequently made to feel like they don't belong in their town hall, to use the rhetoric, due to the personal squabbling of a privileged few. As the town hall became increasingly bureaucratised, this personal squabbling became less publicly evident, but the space still remains heavily regulated. The lay people of the city have resisted the hegemony, but have only really managed to reclaim the exterior of the building, most prominently the stairs leading towards it. During my archival research, I discovered hundreds of different stories and perspectives relating to the building. Many have been forgotten or reformulated to serve state or institutional goals, both at the time of their recording and now. The greatest difficulty I faced in excavating these stories was that the institution itself, or those who appreciated it, were those who had recorded the history in the first place. I've chosen a few of these stories, which I felt represented the constantly contested history and values of the site across time. The historical accuracy of some of them is dubious, but these are the stories which are perpetuated in both popular retellings and the archive itself. These are the mythologies which carry on today, and as such they have meaning, as they form the basis for our understanding of the building.